Hello, I would like to welcome you to today's TechNet webcast, enabling ad hoc reporting with SQL Server 2005 reporting services. I'd now like to hand it over to Carolyn Chow, who's a program manager with Microsoft. Carolyn, you now have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. As was just announced, we're going to be talking about SQL Server 2005 Report Builder today and Model Designer. SQL Server 2005 includes ad hoc reporting capabilities, and the client tool that enables that is Report Builder. And in addition to the Report Builder client tool, there is a Model Designer tool that users use in order to design the metadata that's used by Report Builder. And we'll be showing you this also. So why did we decide to build Report Builder? As you can see, in SQL Server 2000, when we first shipped reporting services, we targeted several different consumers of reports. You can see the different types of consumers of reports. At the outside level, we actually call them consumers, and these are the broadest area of usage of reports. These are people who just receive and view reports and don't necessarily spend a lot of time interacting with them or creating them and designing them. A subset of those people will be your business users who are interested in getting answers to specific questions and understand the business, but don't necessarily have the technical skills or background in order to actually create reports from scratch or know any SQL or underlying database query languages in order to write their own queries against databases. And a subset of those people will be your power users or developers, who will be the people who are primarily responsible for creating reports in your organization. These people are very familiar with the underlying databases, and they are very familiar with the tools for creating reports, and so they're very easily and capable of creating their own reports. In SQL Server 2000, we really targeted the outside consumers, those the people who don't have a lot of technical skills, and the people who are very, very technical and can create and write their own reports. For the consumers, we had our report viewer and our online capability where you could go and view a report via the internet or have reports delivered to you by subscriptions via email or a file share. And for the power users, we had our Report Designer tool, which is our advanced tool in Visual Studio. And this tool allows you to take full advantage of the report definition language that is part of reporting services and really create rich, structured reports. But it does require you to both be in the Visual Studio environment and to have the knowledge of the underlying databases. And usually you end up having to know the underlying language of the database in order to create the type of report or the full richness of the report that you would like. What we heard from users was that we were missing the business users in the middle who are interested in creating their own reports but don't necessarily have the technical skills in order to do so. And that's the target audience that we are shooting for when we work on the Report Builder tool. So what is Report Builder? Report Builder, as I said, is the new ad hoc report design tool for Microsoft SQL Server reporting services. It did ship for the first time with SQL Server 2005. And again, it's targeted at business users, and these are people who are interested in finding out and sharing answers to interesting questions, but don't necessarily have the deep technical skills to understand the underlying physical databases. They understand the business questions they want to ask. They understand the types of data and the types of questions and answers that they intend to receive, but don't necessarily have the underlying deep technical skills to directly connect to the underlying database. So Report Builder, when your users use Report Builder, they're not looking directly at the physical database. Report Builder users work off of a business model of the data, so users don't need to understand the underlying structures. The business model presents a friendly metadata layer for users to interact with. Report Builder is not meant to be a fully analytical client. It's not a replacement for Microsoft Excel pivot tables. And the reason for this, it'll become clear as I go through the demo, is that Report Builder, when you're creating reports, you're interacting with the metadata of the underlying database. So you're creating the structure of the report. You're not necessarily looking at live instances of the report. and manipulating the actual instances of data. However, Report Builder is fully integrated with reporting services and delivered in SQL Server 2005. And what that means is Report Builder just builds report definitions that are in the RDL definition language, which is the definition language used by all reporting services reports. And so you have all of the rich capabilities of reporting services with Report Builder reports. You get the same security models, the same delivery mechanisms, the same viewing capabilities. All of those are the same as any other reporting services report. The Report Builder client application itself is a Click Once Windows application, and it's managed by the report server. What this means is when users are getting and downloading the Report Builder client, a lot of people, when they see it downloaded from the web, believe that it is a thin application, and it is not. It is a Windows Click Once Forms application, and it gets deployed by Click Once, which means that the application is stored on the report server. And when your users go to the URL for launching Report Builder, a copy of the Report Builder application is downloaded and cached on their client machine. And whenever you have a new version or upgrade reporting services and get a new version of Report Builder, the next time your users go out to the internet and access that URL again, they will receive a new version of Report Builder automatically if they have not already downloaded it. So the Click Once Report Builder application requires .NET Framework 2.0, and your users must have that installed prior to downloading Report Builder. And the Report Builder can be launched and downloaded from either Report Manager, which is the ASPX application that we ship out of the box for navigating the report hierarchy and viewing reports, or you can embed the Report Builder URL directly in your third-party applications, and so you can have it within your own environment and have users launch it from your own applications. Report Builder is built on top of familiar Microsoft Office paradigms. When you see the application, we tried very hard to model it after Excel and PowerPoint, so your users are very familiar with the capabilities as soon as they launch Report Builder. Report Builder reports are built off of report templates. So a template includes text boxes for titles and captions, and tables and matrices and charts. So your users don't start with a fresh empty page. They have some predefined elements that they can already fill in as soon as they launch the application. And finished reports can be saved to the server. And again, Report Builder reports are just like any other reporting services report. So you can save them to the server, you can run them, you can schedule them, you can subscribe to them, and so forth. And we'll look at some of those capabilities in the demo also. So let's go ahead and switch over to the Report Builder demonstration. What I'm going to be showing you is building a variety of reports, doing some filtering, sorting in groups, and I'll show you how you can control at a fine level the contents of the reports so you can separate the lists that comes back versus the totals in the reports, and that's what we call filtered aggregates.
And while Carolyn's doing her demo, if you want to view it full screen, you can press the F5 key on your keyboard to view the demo full screen. And then when she's done, you can press the F5 key again to return to normal viewing. Okay, Carolyn, go ahead.
Thanks. So when you are launching Report Manager, this is again the application that we ship out of the box that comes with reporting services. You will see a new button for Report Builder, and when I click on Report Builder, it will go ahead and check to make sure that I have a copy of the application. And again, if I don't, it will go ahead and download it. And if I do, we'll check to make sure that my version is the most recent version. And again, if it's not, then it'll download it. As soon as the application comes up, you can see a list of data sources that I have permissions to. And this list of data sources, again, is not the connections to the underlying database. It's connections to the metadata that is built on top of those databases. So I have a connection for AdventureWorks and one for Northwind. And I'll go ahead and select AdventureWorks. And you have a variety of report layouts that you can select from, a table, a matrix, or a chart. And I'm going to go ahead and create a table and click OK. When the application starts up, you'll see, as I said, their capabilities very similar to PowerPoint and Excel. So you can see that there are, on the design surface, some predefined text boxes, and I can add a title. So this is my new report. And this is the drop area where I'm going to be defining my table. And then we have some additional metadata that gets automatically generated, so whenever you run a new report, you'll see the number of rows. And we also do a restatement of the filter clauses that you have that limit the data that gets returned by this report. On the left-hand side is the Report Explorer, and the Explorer is where you interact with all of the metadata that's in the metadata layer that Report Builder is connecting to. There are several types of metadata. There's the entities that your users can use, and these are the things in the underlying database. They're not necessarily a one-to-one mapping with tables in the underlying database. They are, again, an abstraction that defines the types of things that users want to normally report on. So you've got in this database, which is the AdventureWorks database, we have customers, employees, products, purchase orders, sales orders, salespeople, territories, and a bunch of additional descriptive tables and entities that users can also take advantage of. Whenever your users select a specific entity, they get to see the fields that they can interact with and add to their report. So for customers, customer has a customer name, they have a type, they have contact information, they have possibly a password and so forth. If you go over to products are grouped by subcategory and category. There are product numbers. They have certain order levels and stock levels, and dates when we started selling and discontinued selling them, and information like that. So whenever your report builder model builders go ahead and define the models, you can see some of the different things that they can define directly in the model. For customers, for example, you can see that we go ahead and for all numeric items, actually if I go over to sales order, this might be a little clearer. Sales orders, of course, have amounts. They have sales amounts, tax amounts, subtotals, and so forth. You can see that your model designers can go ahead and describe directly in the model the aggregates associated with each of the totals in your underlying database, and so your users don't have to define aggregates. They already out of the box have the sum, the average, the min, and the max of the totals. For all dates, we go ahead and define if you have a date field in the underlying database, the day, the month, the year, the quarter, and the first and the last day. In order to build a report, it's actually very simple. All I have to do is drag and drop the items that I want onto the design surface. And so if I go ahead and I say I want to actually create a report that shows salespeople and the sales orders and the amounts of the sales orders that they have in a certain month, I can go ahead and either drag and drop the salesperson or the fields that I want directly, and I'll go ahead and drag and drop the salesperson entity. What that does is it drops the default fields for that entity onto the design surface, and the default fields are again described in the model, and we'll go ahead and look at the model designer in the second half of this webcast. So when I drag and drop salesperson, I get the national ID number, the first name, the last name, the email address, and I'm going to group each salesperson by their sales territory. So I'll click on territory, and this time I'll just go ahead and drag and drop the territory name. As you can see, as I'm dragging and dropping things on the design surface, the navigator, the entities list here is changing as I use the drag and drop design surface. And the reason for that is in the model you define all of the relationships in the underlying data. And so your users are not navigating the entire structure. They're only navigating the things that are related to the items that they select. So for salesperson, these are all the items that are related to salesperson. And for territory, if I go down to territory, you'll see the items that are related to territory. And that helps your users to have context for their reports, so they're not looking at all the entities all the time and possibly creating reports with items that don't relate to the other things in their report. So again, I have salesperson grouped by territory, and I'll go ahead and go to sales orders and grab the number of sales orders and the sum total due. So as I'm adding items that are totals onto the design surface, you can see that the report builder automatically adds the subtotals and the grand totals in my report by the grouping. So I'll be able to get the subtotals by each territory and the grand totals for all territories. Once I've added all the items that I would like on my design surface, I go ahead and click the filter button up here, and I can limit the data that comes back based on the filter criteria that I add to my report. So you can see right now I've got salespeople with and I've got nothing, so we'll be returning all information for all salespeople. And instead of doing that, I'm going to go ahead and restrict for sales orders for the ordered year, and I just drag and drop order year, and I get a drop-down list of all the years that are available to select from. And this capability is defined directly in the model whether or not your users see drop-down lists. And of course, there are times when you will want your users to see drop-down lists when the number of values is fairly small, and there are times when you won't want that. If you're looking at all the sales orders, you don't want your users to be selecting from a list of all the sales orders, which might be millions and millions of orders. So that's, again, defined in the model. And I'm going to go ahead and select month 5. And I'll click OK. And once I've defined the items that I want to show on the design surface and also the filter clause that I have, I can go ahead and run this report just by clicking the Run Report button. And as you can see, in order to build a report builder report, I didn't have to write any SQL. This is connected to a SQL Server database. And I didn't have to have a really good understanding of how the structure of the underlying database. All I had to do was drag and drop the items that I wanted to see. So now I have a report with all the territories and the salespeople and their number of sales orders and the sum total due. And you can see actually as I'm navigating through this report, a lot of times on the hover, I show a hand that I can click on. Because we understand where all the data comes from in the underlying database and how all the data is related, when you create a report builder report, we automatically generate click-through links. And your users, as they're navigating looking at data in their reports, can go ahead and click on an item. And what we do is we send the context that you clicked from to the report server, and the report server will automatically generate a new report with the details for the items that you click on. So in the previous report, I clicked on Garrett Vargas, who has 11 sales orders, and when I click on the 11, it goes ahead and sends that to the report server, and a brand new report is generated on the fly and shows me the details for those 11 sales orders. Now, wherever there is a relationship from that item, I can go ahead and continue to explore the data. So let's say I want to see this particular sales order. I can go ahead and click on it, and I'll get the details for that sales order. So a single report builder report is a great place to start any kind of analysis that your user wants just by exploring the data. You can, of course, go back and click on something else, and you'll see the details for that particular sales order. So again, wherever there is a relationship in the underlying database, your users can continue to explore the data. So that's a simple table report. And once I like my report, I can go ahead and save it to the report server. And I'll just go ahead and save it to the very top level, and I'll say this is my sales report. Click Save. And when I go back to the Report Manager and refresh my page, so when I click on that, refresh my page, there's my new sales report. And just like any other reporting services report, now I can click on it from Report Manager, and it'll go ahead and run the report. And once the report runs, I can, as I said, create a new subscription to the report, which will email it to a certain number of people on a certain time or on a certain schedule. And I can go ahead and navigate the report. If I had multiple pages, I can zoom, I can search this report. I can select a format for exporting the report to, and you can see all the different formats that we support out of the box. We have Excel, XML, CSV, TIFF, Word. So using some new Office Writer technology actually that's installed on this machine, we can also export to these other Microsoft Office applications. And you can print, and you can, of course, refresh. So all of the same capabilities that you have with any other reporting services report is available here for Report Builder reports. All right, so let's go back to Report Builder and create a new report, and this time we'll create a matrix report. And for matrix, I'll just go ahead and select, I'll create a report that shows me products and product sales grouped by year and month. foreign quarter. So I got the products. I could group the products by their subcategory and their category. And I'll grab the sales order, and I'll add the order year across the top. And go back and grab the order quarter and drag that right below year. And then I'll go back to sale and add the line totals for all the products. Make this a little bit smaller. All right, so next I'll go ahead and add a simple filter. And I'll say I want products of product category. And I'll select bikes and click OK. And that's just a very simple matrix report. We'll go ahead and run it. And you can see with Report Builder reports, we automatically add in, expand, and collapse. And this is an option that you can turn on and off. And so your users will have the ability to expand and collapse reports. I've got category bikes. I've got several subcategories that I can expand. I can look at road bikes, and that'll show me all the models of road bikes. And under the years, I have the months, and I can go ahead and see those. And that's my simple matrix report. Let's go back and let me show you some sorting and grouping capabilities in Report Builder. So I'll create a new report. And let's go back to tables so that we can easily see some of the grouping capabilities. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a fairly simple report that has year grouped by year and month, and the number of sales orders. And then for grouping, I just click on sorting and grouping. And I want to sort the order years in ascending order by the order year. And for each order year, I want to break after each order year, so each year will show up on a different page. And for order month, I'm going to go ahead and sort the months by the number of sales orders in descending order. So I see the months with the highest sales first. I'll just click OK and go ahead and run this report. And so I've got my first year is 2001, and here's the month with the most sales orders. It happens to be 12 and then 11. And I can continue the page through and see the next year, 2002. And again, December is obviously the month that we have the most sales. And 2003, same thing. So that's sorting and grouping in Report Builder. Let's go back to the design surface, and I'll go ahead and show you some charting. So again, I'm going to continue using AdventureWorks. So I'll select the chart layout, click OK, and I'm not going to save this report. So I can go ahead and say this is my new chart. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so that the chart has a little more room to grow. And charting is very similar to the other tables and matrices that you can build in Report Builders. All you have to do is drag and drop in order to create the items that you want in your chart. So I'm going to create a chart that shows sales territories across the bottom, and the number of sales orders as the orders. And I'm going to add years, sales order year, on the series. And then I'm going to go ahead and filter for the first day of every month. So I'll be looking at a chart of the orders for the first day of every month by year. And you can see there's a set of chart options that I can select. I can say I want, instead of the column chart, I want a simple line chart. And I'll go ahead and change the legend so it doesn't quite take up as much room on the page. by adding it to the inside of the plot area, and I'll just move it to the top right. And I can change the titles. So I can say this is sales first of every month. And across the category axis, I have territories and number of orders. Okay. And I'll go ahead and run that chart. And then you can see the sales for each territory and the number of, and the years and the sales amounts. So the nice thing about Report Builder charts also is they're just as clickable as tables and matrices are. So I can pick any point on the chart and say I want to look at that particular item. And the report server will go ahead and show me all of the orders for that particular data point. And so you have the same interactivity in charts as you do with tables and matrices. You can continue to click wherever, again, there is a relationship in the underlying database. So let's go back to designing. And now let's take a look at some of the more advanced filter features. I've shown you a basic table, matrix, and chart, and some grouping and sorting capabilities. So let's go ahead and take a look at some additional, more in-depth filtering capabilities. So this time I'm going to select, again, a table. And let's say we're running a marketing campaign, and we'd like to create a mailing and decide who to send the mailer to. So I'm going to create a customer list. And I want to target customers who have a certain behavior. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring back the customer list. So I'll just add customer. I'm going to, don't really care what their customer type is, so I'm going to go ahead and remove that. And I'm going to group customers by their territory. And I'm going to bring back the number of sales orders for the customers. And again, their total sales with us. So there's my customer report. And I'm going to go to filter. And so far, as I've been creating filters, I've been leaving this checkbox on the bottom of the dialog checked, and that's the default state for Report Builder. When the box is checked, basically whichever filter criteria you have, we will go ahead and limit all of the data by that criteria. When I uncheck the checkbox, what I'm going to do is I'm going to return a list of customers who meet the criteria that I'm going to create, but I'm not going to affect the totals in the report. So I'm going to return a limited list of criteria, a filtered list of customers based on the criteria that I have, but for each customer, I'm going to show all of their sales orders and all of their sales with us, sales amounts with us across all of time, and basically across all of the data. So I'm going to ask for customers with, and let's look at customers who have sales orders where the bill to address, the address that they're paying from, is in a certain list. And you can see the filter criteria looks a little bit different. Instead of having just customers with any with state and province equal to something, I've got customers with any bill to address with state province equals, and I'm going to select equals and change it to in a list. And so in addition to single values, we can of course support multiple value selections. And I'm going to select the O states, Ohio, Oklahoma, and Oregon. So I've got customers with any bill to address in this particular list, and I'm going to look at their sales, and I want them to have bought specific things in specific time frames. So for the first one, I want order years, where the order years in 2003, I want them to have bought a bicycle. So I'll go ahead and select product, and actually I want them to have bought a mountain bike. So also any subcategory where the item is a mountain bike. And in 2004, I want them to have bought some clothing for their to go mountain biking with. So I'm going to go ahead and say I want in 2004. I'll select the order year again, and I'll say in 2004 I want them to have purchased some clothing. I'll go back to product, and clothing is a category, so I'll add that in. So now I have a clause that says I want customers with any bill-to address, so they've at any time have billed their address in Ohio, Oklahoma, and Oregon, and any sales order in 2003 where they bought a mountain bike, and any sales order in 2004 where they bought clothing. So I'll click OK, and I can go ahead and run that report. And again, when I'm looking at this list of customers, it'll be the list of customers who meet my criteria. But for each customer, I'm going to show all of their sales across all time. So there's actually only one customer who meets this criteria, and they had 2 sales orders for this amount. And so I'm going to actually just be a little more lax about which customers I look at, since there's so few customers for my sales, my marketing campaign. I'm going to go ahead and say, instead of having them purchase a mountain bike in 2003 and clothing in 2004, I can change this to an or. And so now I'm looking at people who have purchased from Ohio, Oklahoma, and Oregon, and they purchased a mountain bike or some clothing. So I'll click OK, and I will go ahead and run the report again. And now I have a slightly larger list of people that I can go ahead and target. So again, I've got customers who meet my criteria, and there's 9 pages of them. But for each customer, I've got all of their sales orders across all times and the total amounts that they've purchased across all times. I can show you that it's different across different years by adding another sum total amount, for example. So I can say for this total, it's the all sales across all time. And for this total, I actually just want to show sales in 2002, for example. So I can go ahead and change the header on that. And when I right-click on this particular total, I can edit the formula. And you can see that this formula is just a simple reference to sum total due. There are actually a set of functions that you can use in creating formulas. Of course, aggregate functions, conditional functions, conversion functions, date and time, logical math and operators. Right. So I'm not going to go ahead and use these right now, but those are all available to you. What I want to show you is actually if you double-click on a formula and expand the formula, you can see how that item relates to the root of your report. So sum total due comes from sales orders, which is directly related to customer. I can filter anywhere along this path and limit the information that comes back. So I can say sales orders, and I want to create a new filter. And I just want sales orders where the order year is 2002. 2002. So click OK. And now you can see that the sales orders have to be in this particular filter. And so now when I run the report, I should see different sales amounts. This is all sales across all time, and sales for just 2002. So as you can see, a lot of people actually don't have sales in 2002, and you can compare their amounts from 2002 compared to all time. You can see some of the differences. So when you're creating a report builder report, you have a lot of control over the type of query that you're actually submitting and getting information back for. So your reports are fairly flexible in the way that you can group them and control the filters that apply at different levels, whether it applies the entire to the entire data set or it applies to this particular aggregate only. There's a lot of control in how you can manipulate your reports. Okay. So now that I've shown you some of the capabilities of Report Builder, let's go ahead and go back to the slides. And I'll just go ahead and close Report Builder for now. Okay, so just to recap a little bit of what we've seen, Report Builder reports, again, are just like any other reporting services report. They're just RDL. The only difference between a Report Builder report and a normal reporting services report is where your normal reporting services report, where you connect directly to a data model, you are actually creating a query, and that query gets stored directly in your RDL. And instead, in the Report Builder report, we're collecting the metadata for that report that generates the query, and the metadata is stored directly in the reporting services report. When that metadata gets sent to the report server does actually all of the heavy lifting for Report Builder. So the metadata is sent to the report server, and all the data processing happens on the report server. The server actually connects to the underlying database. It submits the query in whichever language that you happen to have for your data source. And in SQL Server 2005, we support SQL Server analysis services, and we will also be having Oracle support coming soon in SQL Server reporting SB2. So that's SQL Server 2005 Service Pack 2, which will be coming out earlier next year. There will be support for Oracle data sources also. Report Builder reports, again, are the same as any other reporting services report in that they get managed by the same APIs. You can secure them with the same APIs as you do your normal reporting services reports. And one of the other features that I showed you that we think is very unique about Report Builder is the infinite drill capability. And that's the capability where you are looking at a particular report and your users can click on items, and then we, on the server, generate a brand new report on the fly for the user's location. Your users can keep exploring the data wherever there is a additional connection from the item that they started from. The reports that we generate on the fly, those are controllable through the report model, the fields that are shown in that report. However, if the capabilities that we give you in Model Designer to control the fields in the report are not sufficient, you can go ahead and create your own custom reports and associate them with each of the entities in the model, and your users will drill directly to the report that you specify rather than the default report that we create. So those drill-through reports are customizable. Now let's take a quick look at the architecture for Report Builder. You can see on the report server area down here, these are the new places, the new capabilities that are added by the Report Builder functionality. On the report server, we have two new components, the the report generation and the query generation. We've talked about both of those. Report Builder hands off the metadata for a report, and the report server actually translates that metadata to the underlying query, and it also generates those drill-through reports when your users click on items. There are two new components, two new end-user components, the Report Builder client, which is what I've just shown you. The model design tool here, which is the tool that I'm going to show you next, is what you use in order to generate the metadata that's used by Report Builder. And there's integration with other pieces of reporting services. In Report Manager, as I've shown you, there's a new button for Report Builder so that your users, if they have permission to download Report Builder, will see that button and be able to run Report Builder. We have integration with Report Designer. In Report Designer, just like any other data source, you will now be able to connect to a Report Builder model and design reports off of a Report Builder model directly in Report Designer. And that's really great for several reasons. Your users, if they are using Report Builder and come up with a point where they're not able to get what they want from Report Builder, you can go ahead and take that report directly into Report Designer and add the additional capabilities that are available in Report Designer. Or your IT staff, if they're starting in Report Designer anyway, they can go ahead and create reports that your end users can then take into Report Builder, as long as the capabilities are supported by Report Builder, and be able to modify those reports. And in SQL Server Management Studio, there are some additional capabilities that we've added to support Report Builder also. And there are two major items, and those are that you can generate a report Report Builder model directly in SQL Server Management Studio just by selecting any data source that's supported by Report Builder. And clicking the Generate Model option. In addition to that, there is actually model security, which we may not be able to get to today, but basically you can secure a model at many different levels, and that security is managed through Management Studio. And you can get documentation about the model security directly in Books Online. So let's go ahead and talk about the Model Design Tool. The Model Design Tool, again, is the interface that your model designers will use to create and edit the models or the metadata that's used by Report Builder. The Model Designer is a new project type in the Business Intelligence Development Studio that comes with SQL Server 2005. And the Model Designer allows you to define fields and roles. You can define calculated fields. You can organize the model, and I'll show you examples of all of those in the demonstration. And models can be auto-generated in Model Designer or on the server also, in addition to using the Model Design Tool. We basically take all of the defaults that we would normally have in Model Designer and connect to the data source and generate a model that you can start using right away. And you can do that against either SQL Server or Analysis Services today, and again with Oracle in the coming service pack. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the Model Design Tool. Go back. And I've already got an instance of Business Intelligence Development Studio started. I can go to File, New, and I'll say New Project. And in the list of projects that comes up, I can see there's a Report Model project now, so a new project type. And I'll just call this my Demo Model project. I'll say OK. And it will go ahead and create the new project with all of the templates that are required for us to design and use models. And you can see that these are the different pieces that are required for a report model project. There's a data source view, and a report model. And I'll just talk about them as I go ahead and create them. A data source, of course, is the connection information that we need in order to connect to the underlying database. So I'm actually going to use a data source, Northwind, here on this machine, and I've already got a connection to it. So I'll just give the data source a name. Demo. And I'll create a new data source view. And a data source view is the physical representation of the underlying database. So it's a direct translation of what you have in the physical database into a view that report models use to map to the underlying database. And this is the same data source view capability. If those of you who have used analysis services, these are the same data source views as you would use to create an analysis services cube. So I select the data source that I want to use for this data source view. And click Next. And it's asking me how I would like to match columns because I actually don't have foreign keys to find in my underlying database. And same name as the primary key is just fine in this case. If you have foreign keys, that dialog will actually be, you'll just skip it and go on. And I can select the objects that I want to use from this database. And the objects can be either tables or views. So let's go ahead and, there are just these tables in this database, and I'll select all of them. And I'll give my data source view a name. Click Finish. And I'll show you quickly what the data source view looks like. So the data source view, again, is the physical representation of the underlying database. So there's one item for each table in the underlying database, and one item within each table shows each column in the database. There are two important things that you must have in your data source view for Report Builder to work correctly. And one of those is relationships between the items in your data source view such that we can define the relationships in the model. So those are basically definitions of foreign keys. The other thing is the primary key must be defined in each of your tables. And you don't have to do either the foreign key add the foreign key information or the primary key information to your physical database, you can define them right here in the data source view. So if you don't want to change your physical schema, you can go ahead and do a set of that modeling capability directly in your data source view. In this case, I don't have to do anything because the primary keys are defined and the foreign keys are defined also. And I didn't want to add a relationship there to itself. So that's a data source view. And I'll go ahead and create a new report model. Click Next. And it asks me which data source view I would like to use to create my report model. Click Next. There are a set of rules that you can turn on and off when we generate the base model. And those rules define whether or not we create entities for all tables, whether we can create the default count attribute for each entity, the date variations I showed you, the aggregate variations. You can turn those on and off here. I'll just take the default for now. And you can also actually define which language which language rules that we will use when we generate these this model. And the language rules determine how we handle the naming in the model. And in this case, the data is English, and the schema names are all in English, so I'll go ahead and select English. This next page asks whether or not we want to collect model statistics. And these are not database statistics. We don't touch your database statistics when we generate a model. What these statistics are is metadata that we will use in order to determine whether we show the drop-downs in the report builder, whether what the lengths of the columns are and things like that. So these are statistics that are stored in the data source view, and they're used only to set the default attributes in the model. And if you don't want us to do that, you can go ahead and turn it off and then make sure that you go through and check that the attributes are set correctly after you've generated your model. So I'll click Next and click Run, and it'll just go ahead and run through my data source and create all the default entities and fields and variations that I've asked for. And it doesn't take that long. And once it's done processing, what I'll have is a base model from which then I can go ahead and modify and customize to the way that my end users would like to see it. Okay, so it's all done. I'll click Finish. And yes, I'd like to reload because I've added statistics to my data source view, so it's been changed. So I can see each of the entities that have been created, one for each table by default, and there's an attribute that's created for each column in each table. And if I go ahead and look at some of the details, for example, you can see that we've created the aggregate variations on order. We've created the date variations. And once you've actually created this base model, I'm going to go ahead and publish it so that we can go ahead and run a quick report in Report Builder and show you what the base model looks like. Basically, you can use the report model right out of the box. As soon as you generate the base model, you can see the deploy succeeded on the bottom. I can go home, launch Report Builder, and start using the model right away. That's really helpful when you're going through and basically making lots of changes in your model. You can go ahead and set them with your end users, try it out, and then go ahead and go back to your project and make additional changes as needed. So I had a demo Northwind, a Northwind model already, but this is my new model, Northwind demo. Let's go ahead and create a table. And I'm going to select Products and Category. And you can see that we take a guess at what the default item should be. I actually don't want the ID. You can change that in the underlying model. I don't really want the ID here either. I'll just grab the product name, and I'll look for orders where the sum of the total is there. And you can see in the fields I have unit price, I have quantity, I have discount, but I actually don't have a sum of the sales for this order, which would be unit price times quantity. That might be something nice that I could add that my users won't have to define every single time. And I'll go ahead and run this report. This is just a quick sample report to show you what it looks like when you first add items. And you can see here products grouped by category. There's the price, and it's a decimal out of the box. It's not formatted. I can go ahead and do that in the model also. And I can click on any of these items, and by default, a order details report will come up. And you can see I've got order date, required date, ship date, and the product name. And let's go back, and I can actually, let's add a number of orders to the report and run that. And orders is, of course, the number of orders is also clickable, turned on by default. And for orders, I can see order ID, the freight, the order date, the required date, the ship date, and similar information to the order details. What would be nice here is that I could see what regions that these orders are being shipped to. I can go ahead and add that to this drill-through report. So a couple of those things that I've mentioned we can go ahead and do in the report model. Let me close Report Builder first. And in the model, I can go ahead and name things. So for example, if I don't like orders, my salespeople or whoever is going to be using this model doesn't think of the order details as details. They think of them as line items. So the orders and line items, I can go ahead and change the names so I can have friendly names. I can, for the line item, the unit price, I can go ahead and change the formatting of these columns so that they come out to be currencies. All of the properties for each of the items is in the Properties Explorer. So for entities, you can see there's a set of properties. And for attributes, there's another set of properties. So I was looking at line item, and I want to go ahead and change the total unit price and change the format. And any .NET format string will do. So I'm going to say C2, which is currency with 2 decimal places. And I'll just go ahead and change some of these other ones too. This is actually an F2, which I'm going to change to a C2. And the thing that controls what I see when I drill through is actually a combination of different things that you need to keep in mind. For order, the details of the orders that I'm going to get when I do a drill through report are controlled by the default detail attributes. And you can see there are 5 of them that we picked up while we were doing the model auto generation. The order ID, the freight, the order date, the required date, and the ship date. I can go ahead and add some additional fields. Let's say I want the city and the region that the order went to. And I can just go ahead and add those. And those fields will now show up in that drill-through report. When I'm looking at line item, I also saw that I would like to add a calculation here so my users don't have to define it all the time. And I think a calculation that they'll use a lot is actually unit price times quantity. The sum of the unit price times quantity, in fact, I want it to be an aggregate. So I can go ahead and add an additional field. I'll just go up to the report model and I say I want a new expression. And just like the report builder expression capability that I show you, this is the exact same expression dialog. So you have the same expression definition capability in both places. I say I want the sum, and I want the unit price times the quantity. It's a very simple, fairly simple expression. Click OK. I'll go ahead and call that my total sales. And there are several important things that I want to, attributes that I want to set for this new attribute. I want to set the enable drill through to true. That's what allows users to click through on this item. I want to format this as a sales amount, so I'm going to go ahead and format that as a currency also. And it is an aggregate, so I want to make sure that I set that the aggregate is true. And I also want to set that it's nullable. And there are a set of other things that you can determine for the expression. But those are the things that I'd like to set now, so I'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so I've made a set of changes, and I can go ahead and save the project and redeploy. And the deploy succeeded, so I'll go ahead back to Report Manager. I'll relaunch Report Builder so that the model can be reloaded. And I've got this Northwind demo again. Click OK to reload the model. And you can see the line item has been changed. So instead of order details, I now have line items. Now I'll just recreate that same report that I was showing you before, which is product sales. Select the product. And I'll go and add the product name. I'll group by the category. And I'll go ahead and ask for the orders. And I'll add the number of orders. And you can see actually when I changed the entity to read line items, I didn't change the role from product to that entity. So that role still reads order details. We can go ahead and change that later also. When I click on order details here, which is line item, you can see the new expression that I've created, which is total sales. I can go ahead and add that in. And I'll just go ahead and add in the total unit price also. And you can see the formatting of those has changed. So I'll go ahead and run this report. So I have products grouped by their category, the number of orders, and the correct formatting for the prices, the unit price totals, and the total sales of the order. And when I click through, I did change the drill through report, so I should start seeing the state and the region. There's the city and the region that I've added to the drill through report just by changing the references in the report model. So those are some of the changes that you can make that are fairly easy and you'll want to do fairly often. Let's go back to the report model and do a couple more changes. So actually before I do that, let me show you the two changes I'm going to make are, of course, the role. I want this to read order details, to read line items. And also products, if I go to category, when I dragged in the category item, there's actually only, let's say there's only one interesting field for a category, and that happens to be the category name. There are actually no pictures in this database. So instead of having users have to navigate from product to category to get the product category, I can actually make the product category name directly show up under product. And that just saves my users for some clicks later on. So go ahead and close this report builder report, and let's go back to the model and make those two changes. So from product, I have a role to order details right here, and I want to change that to line items so that it matches the entity name that I've also changed. So there's line item. And for category, I can look and see that the default detail attributes, actually the identifying attributes, there's a single identifying attribute for category, which is the one interesting field about it. And because there's only one identifying attribute, I can actually go ahead and promote this entity. And let's say that it's true. And what that does is it takes that one identifying attribute and pushes it up into any entities that reference it. So under product, there is a relationship to category, and now I can see that the category is actually a field here instead of a role. And when I do that, I want to make sure that the name that I see is going to be right. So there is a name field for category, for this role, and that's the contextual name. And I want the contextual name to just be the role name. And you can have the contextual name be the merge or the aggregate of both the role name and the field name, but I don't really need that, so I'll just go ahead and say it's the role name. I'll save. Go ahead and build and deploy again. And it succeeded, so I'll go ahead and relaunch Report Builder and just show you those two changes. So select Northwind. So this time when I go to product, I can see category is here. And you see category no longer shows up in the list. It's not really a high-level entity anymore. I said it's really just a field that belongs with product. So I've got product name, I've got category. So I can go ahead and directly drag and drop category from here. And the role from product to order details is now line item because I've changed that role name. And I can go ahead and just grab the total sales again and run that report. And so those are some additional changes that you might like to make. The report model is actually pretty powerful in the ways that it can transform your underlying schema. We won't have time to show you all of that, but some of the things to consider are whether or not you want to merge or denormalize your schema, and you can do that directly. There are several ways to do that. I've shown you one, the easiest way, which is lookup. We also have inheritance, and we have expanded line. Both of those things will allow you to take a snowflake schema or a schema that's very normalized and go ahead and denormalize them to make it easier for your users to find things. Instance selection is the item that determines whether or not you see drop-downs in the underlying, when your users use Report Builder. And you can see in this particular attribute category is a drop-down list, so I'll see that when I go to filter. There are also, for columns that have more values, you can have the ability to change from drop-down to list or filtered list. And these will require your users to see a different UI or to actually create a filter before they see the list of items that match their criteria. The other thing we have is a mandatory filter. So if your users are interacting with an entity that has a lot of instances, like sales, for example, you don't want your users to run that report if they're asking for every single instance of sales. We do allow you to say that if a user is asking for all instances of sales, that they'll get a message that says you must have a filter on this item. So that keeps your users from accidentally asking for all instances of something that may take a really long time or never return from the underlying database. Or you wouldn't want to see millions and millions of pages of individual sales. All of the attributes and items that are in the model that you can set are, of course, documented with Books Online, and I'd highly encourage you to take a look at some of that as you're going through and thinking about how you want to model your underlying database in your business model so it makes the most sense to your end users. All right, so that's some of the capabilities of Model Designer, so let's go back to the slides. And we'll just wrap up and take some questions. So again, as you've seen, report models define entities, fields, and roles, and those may loosely map to tables, columns, and relationships in your underlying database, but there are many, many ways to transform the look of the underlying database in your report model via the capabilities of the report model itself. Models reference a data source, and in SQL Server 2005, you can only reference a single data source with each model. So when we shipped, it was either SQL Server or Analysis Services, and we are going to be supporting Oracle in an upcoming service pack, so that is coming. Models are a new item type in the report server, so when you publish a model, you're actually publishing that to the report server, and it gets stored on the report server. All Report Builder reports will have the model as a data source and not a connection to the underlying database. So when you create your Report Builder reports or you're uploading them from somewhere, make sure they are associated with the model as the data source. And there are several ways to secure a model. I won't be showing them to you today, but we can talk about them briefly. Models can be secured at the model level. So within Management Studio, you can go in and say, these people have the rights to see this model. Within the models, you can actually secure the model items themselves, so you can grant permissions on individual entities, individual fields, and individual roles. Those can all be secured separately, so you have good granular control of who gets to see what within the model. In addition to that, there is actually also the capability to secure rows of data within the actual database. So you can go into a model and define a filter that says territory equals northwest. And you can grant people permission to that filter and apply that filter to an entity so that users who come in, you can map that filter, for example, to their login name. And you can say, only people in the Northwest territory get to see Northwest sales. So that's really a key capability if you're doing that kind of row-level security in your underlying data source. And again, that's all documented online. You can go ahead and find that documentation in books online. Model security is all managed through SQL Server Management Studio, and you'll need to go there in order to set the security for these models. One of the other questions that we get very often is now we have two design tools for reporting services. We have Report Builder and Model Designer. And what are the differences between the two design tools, and how do I know when to use which? And this is kind of a quick summary of those differences. So Report Builder, as we've been looking at, is targeted at business users. These are people who want to get information but don't necessarily have deep understanding of the underlying database. Report Designer is targeted more at IT professionals and developers. These are people who really understand how to manipulate reports and how to manipulate data directly using SQL, using an MDX, and know how to format and work within the Visual Studio environment. Report Builder is ad hoc reporting, so it's an environment where you can go ahead and drag and drop and explore data. And Report Designer is more geared towards production reports. So these are banded reports or structured reports that are more for publishing and production quality reports. Report Builder auto-generates queries using the model as the data source. And Report Designer uses native queries, so you're actually writing SQL, ADB, XMLA, any kind of that capability that we support. And the one place where that's a little bit not quite right is Report Designer also. You can use and go ahead and connect to a model and also generate reports on top of Report Builder models. In Report Builder, reports are built on top of templates. Report Designer is totally freeform. You can nest things. You can band reports. You can have something that we don't support in Report Builder that we would like to get to as soon as possible is multiple data regions, so you can have tables and matrices and charts, any number of them in your report. That's not currently in Report Builder. Report Builder is a quick once application. It's easy to deploy and manage to your end users. You just grant them permission and make sure they have .NET Framework 2.0, and they can go ahead and download and use Report Builder. And Report Designer requires that your users have Visual Studio or BI Development Studio. And Report Builder today cannot import reports from Report Designer, but Report Designer can certainly import reports from Report Builder. So those are some of the differences to keep in mind when you're thinking about your users and what level of sophistication they have in terms of creating reports and which tool is more suited for their capabilities. So in summary, we looked at Report Builder. It's the new ad hoc query tool for SQL Server reporting services. It really is targeted at business users for ad hoc reporting, and it's driven from a data model, and there's a new model design tool for your IT professionals to go in and design the business model. And your users don't need to understand the underlying data source. They just need to look at the metadata and drag and drop the items that they want. And Report Builder is fully integrated with Reporting Services 2005. So you have all the same capabilities of Reporting Services, the platform, and you can apply that to the Report Builder reports. So thank you very much for joining us today with today's session. We'll be taking questions. If you go ahead and submit your questions, we'll be online for a couple of minutes to take your questions.
Yeah, I do want to remind you, I see we do have a few questions in the queue, Carolyn. I do want to remind everyone you can submit text questions using the Ask button down there. For upcoming and previously live webcasts, you can go to Microsoft.com/webcast. I do want to encourage everyone to fill out the survey. I'm going to put it up here and give everybody a chance to fill it out. There are two options, registered online and all the registrants. Please select the one that applies to you, and I encourage you to fill this out while Carolyn's answering some of your questions here. There's also, in addition to the scoring of the webcast, there's also a spot where you can make comments, and we do read those. If you've got any comments or suggestions or anything you would like to let us know about, go ahead and feel free to use that section. We do read it. Carolyn, we got a number of questions in the queue. Would you like to answer as many of those as we can, I guess?
Yeah, sure. I'll just go ahead and answer those live. That's a good idea. First question is, what is Microsoft Office Excel pivot table? Excel pivot tables is a capability that comes within Excel that allows you to explore data and do the kinds of capabilities that I showed you in the matrix report for Report Builder. But you can, in addition to working with the different metadata about the underlying database, you can work with specific instances. So instead of saying, I want to look at products and their categories, I can go into an Excel pivot table and say, I want to look at clothing and bikes and shoes, and actually look at specific instances of data, and you can drag and drop those around and work with them directly in Excel. The next question is, since salesperson is several fields, can you eliminate one if you wanted to, for example, the email address? Yes, so when you're dragging and dropping an entity onto the design surface, the fields that show up are controlled by the model. So you can go ahead and define what fields will show up when the users drag and drop the default fields. The next question is, what's the advantage of Report Builder accessing the metadata versus reporting services that accesses the data directly via queries? The advantage is the metadata layer allows you to create a model that's familiar for end users. So if your underlying database doesn't have friendly names, is very, very spread out in terms of its snowflaked, or the schema is difficult for your end users to understand, you can hide all of that complexity in the metadata layer by creating a report model that basically represents the data the way that the end users want to see them. All right. So is Infinite Drill available across all versions of SQL Server? That's a great question. Infinite Drill is only available in SQL Server Enterprise Edition. All the other Report Builder capabilities are available in Standard and, in fact, in Workgroup. But Infinite Drill is only available in Enterprise. What does deploy report mean? So when we were in Model Designer, we were deploying models, and deploying a model means publishing the model to the report server. Deploy report in reporting services terms means the same thing. It means to publish a report to the report server. So deploy to us always means publish. The next question is, when will the Oracle Data Source version be released? It will be coming in the next Service Pack, which will be Service Pack 2. The final date for that has not yet been announced, but it should be sometime early next year. Next question is there a way to notify a user that the field filters that he has selected for their report will generate more than X number of result rows? That's a great question also. Today, no. We don't have a way to pre-process the report and tell the user that 20 rows or 100 rows is going to come back. It's a good suggestion. We've written it down, and it's like something we would like to do for the future, but we currently don't have that. Sounds like security in Report Builder is the same as in reporting services. However, not familiar with that. Could you give a bit more of an explanation? Sure. Reporting services allows you to secure in many different ways. But by default, we have what we call the security extensions. So we work with Windows Integrated Security and FormSoft Security. We can work with reporting. You can allow reporting services to manage your security. And so the storage of the security all depends on what you select for the report server in general. The security extensions is extensible so that you can create your own security extension and have reporting services use your custom security extension. So if you have a security scheme that we don't support, you can go ahead and create your own security extension, and we'll go ahead and use that so we can farm off the security portion to you. And exactly like you said, Report Builder takes advantage of all of that security capability. The additional thing that Report Builder brings in terms of security is the model layer security. So that's the only difference. It's an additional layer of security that you can add directly to the model. Next question is, I understand Report Builder is dependent on .NET 2.0. Is Report Builder dependent on SQL Server 2005? So yes and no. You must have an instance of SQL Server 2005 in order to get Report Builder, but your data source, the data sources that Report Builder can run off, can be SQL Server 2000 or greater. Actually, it can be 97 or greater. So you need 2005 in order to get the application, but once you have the application, you can connect to older versions of SQL Server to run your reports from. And currently the last question is, can model security be driven, controlled by ASP.NET role-based membership services? Not directly, I don't think. What you'll need to do is probably create a report model, a security extension, and extend it that way in order to support that. If we pass the parameter from web applications by using Report Designer, can we have Report Builder to support other business users at the same solution? So passing a parameter from a web application. Currently, Report Builder only allows you to basically run queries directly on the metadata. So you can't hook into the parameter capability. In order to do that, what you'd have to do is you could start and create a report in Report Builder and take it to Report Designer and change the parameter capability there. But so that's not directly supported today. I'm just trying to think through there's a good workaround for that. I don't think there is. It's a good suggestion. We get feedback all the time that people would like the Report Builder capabilities in terms of parameters to be a little more flexible. So we'll take that as good feedback. Can Report Builder connect to multiple databases or models as you described to generate a single report? No, in the current version you can only connect to one data source for your model, so Report Builder reports can only connect to one data source. We are working on that. We would like to extend that as soon as we can. Next question is, how do underlying model changes affect existing Report Builder reports? So when you change your model, it may or may not affect your Report Builder reports. If you, of course, remove something from your model, that item will be removed from your Report Builder report. Your Report Builder report will reference something that is no longer there. So you have to go to the report and actually remove the item from your report. If you change, say, the formatting or something, that won't change the Report Builder reports. So there are some changes that you can make to the formatting and to the default behavior that won't change your reports, but there are some breaking changes, such as removing or deleting, that you'll have to go in and change your reports in order to accommodate. Okay?
Okay, I'm showing no further questions. I do want to thank Carolyn Chow for presenting today. And thank you everyone for attending today's webcast. That concludes today's TechNet webcast. You may now disconnect from the audio portion of this conference.